Hi everybody, and welcome to our show. I'm Marilyn Dayton, your host and producer of From This Corner TV. And as always, we love to bring you entertainment. We always like to entertain, but also topics that both interest and educate you. And on tonight's show, we're going to be talking with Kathleen Stauffer.
That's right.
Yeah, I got it. CEO of the ARC of New London County. Kathleen has a long list of councils and conferences that she's been appointed to and is involved in. For instance, our Connecticut Governor's Cabinet on Nonprofit Health and Human Services, and the National Conference of Executives of the ARC, which is NCE, and last year was named Executive Director of the Year by the Chamber of Commerce of Eastern Connecticut. Wow. Welcome to our show.
Thank you, Marilyn. It's very nice to be here.
I'm so glad that you could come on our show because this is an important organization from everything that I've seen. And there are quite a few organizations out there that are nonprofits that are trying to help people that need help. But why don't we start with you identifying who ARC is,
Sure.
and who you help.
Sure. The ARC New London County was founded in 1958 by parents whose children in those days were not welcome in our public schools. People with intellectual and developmental disabilities have been a really marginalized population in this country and in our society. And people really are not aware of the kind of life that a parent or a family, we're all just about one genetic marker away from a very different life. Mm-hmm. And if your child is born with a disability, today we have a lot more support. Certainly the ARC is one of those organizations that supports people with IDD, but back in the day there wasn't anything. And so a group of parents got together right here in Groton in a living room, passed a hat, and collected $10.69 for the educations of their children. And out of that grew the ARC New London County, which now serves and employs almost 1,000 people in New London County. And we provide everything from residential supports to job coaching, vocational training. And our goal is to sit down with a person with intellectual and developmental disability, to sit down with a family and find out what their goals are, what their hopes are, what their dreams are, what their challenges are, and help that family and help that person become as absolutely independent as they can be in their life, help people get jobs, help people get homes, and really help people connect with a community that traditionally has sort of marginalized them and unfortunately, as I know we're going to talk about, stereotyped them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. It's we call it the R word.
Exactly.
We talk about we want to get rid of the R word. Because when I was growing up, that's the word that they used for everything. Everything just was kind of, if you had any kind of problem, if you couldn't get along with others, any kind of problem that set you apart from what we call the normal person, you were categorized in the R group.
That's absolutely true, and it's tragic.
Yeah.
And people say, how is this ARC different from that ARC? And really, every ARC has at its core this sense of advocacy, that every one of us is equal in God's eyes and in society. And that is where the parents who wanted a second chance for their kids, were coming from in terms of that philosophy. And so there are service chapters of the ARC. The ARC New London County is the service chapter. We help people with the day-to-day details of their lives. And then there are advocacy chapters, which really do advocate for inclusion for all people at the state level, at the federal level. So there's a national ARC. But what binds us together, aside from the name ARC, is that we have a philosophy of full inclusion. And when you talk about the so-called R word, I have to tell you, I grew up in Pennsylvania. And one day, my brother and I were fighting, and I can assure you he did something very annoying. I don't remember what it
Brothers
was
do
anymore.
That, yeah.
Well, he was a typical brother, and I love him. But I called him a name, and I used the R word, and my mother got quite upset with me. And she said, "Don't ever use that word again. That word ruined my life. I can't imagine what it did to my sister because people called her that every day.
Oh,
My aunt had epilepsy. And when you talked about people being grouped into categories because they are different, in America, this is a very important civil rights lesson for all of us. When we judge people by one thing or another thing and use this as a life sentence for people. My aunt was put in a home called Wernersville in Pennsylvania. This was an institution. The family was encouraged to put her there. My grandparents really didn't want to send one of their children away, but parents were often really pressured to do so. They were told for the good of the family, this is what should happen, for the good of society. And really, people were sent to institutions. They were not educated. They were not taught life skills. There are people that we serve who were only fed a ground diet, so now they're 50 years old and they can't chew.
Oh, wow.
So what was done to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities just because of an IQ is really horrific, and it's not a chapter that's very well known by the average American and those of us who work in our communities and live in our communities, how we marginalize people. And my aunt had epilepsy. I said to my mom, did she have intellectual disability? My mother said, I don't know, she was my sister and I love her. We would do our homework together.
Yeah.
I wasn't looking for less. I was looking for who she was. But my aunt went to Wernersville, and my mom always told the story of my grandfather. My grandfather was a hardworking man, the father of 10 children. He had a farm. He worked in a factory. He was always trying to make ends meet. And one day somebody stopped at the farm, and they said that women patients, which is what people in institutions were called in those days, they said women patients were getting pregnant in Wernersville, and nobody knew how it was happening. And my mother tells the story that my grandfather walked away. He said nothing. He just walked away from the conversation. He walked into the house. He got his car keys and he drove away without a word. And when he came back, my aunt was in the car. And he gave word that under no circumstances was she ever to go back to Wernersville. And he said, I don't need a college degree to know that Wernersville is no good for my daughter. And that story plays itself out over and over and over again in our communities and in our households. And we're going to be talking about the mission of the ARC in a couple of minutes, but I met with some of the original founding families and said, what was your vision? What was your dream for your children? And one of the mothers, and she's in a home, in a nursing home herself now because she's in her 80s, but she said, we weren't ever trying to start something big. I just wanted a fair shake for Donnie. Oh. And as a parent, as an aunt, as a mother, as a brother or a sister, you want the people you love to have a fair shot at life. And that's really, we can talk about the mission, we can give you a paragraph, we can tell you what the official, but really it's a fair shake for our kids.
Exactly. Yeah. It's, what, I wish that we'd had organizations like this when I was growing up, because I did have friends who had a brother or sister who was having a lot of problems. And there weren't labels. I mean, you couldn't say, well, this child has epilepsy, and that just, makes it very difficult for that child.
And this child has a developmental delay, and if we give this person this kind of support, this person can graduate from high school, might need a year or 2 or 3 years more, but then they can get a job, and this person can have a life, and this person can have friends, and then that there isn't a burden on the family when a person is independent. And there are also families who have 24/7 care. And this is very difficult for a family.
Very difficult, yeah.
One day you go to the hospital, you have a baby, and the next day your life is completely changed. For all of us, but for some more than others. And those kinds of supports lead to divorce. They lead to stress. They lead to more abuse in a family, in a household, because of the stress of that coping. And so everybody needs a little bit of support in our communities. I think for all of us to be all that we can be, none of us really do it alone. Some of these families really need a little bit more support, and that's what our role is at the ARC New London County.
And it's not just emotionally challenging as a family unit, it's also financially challenging.
Yes, it
is. It's, there are just so many different elements that wrap around caring for your loved ones. no matter what their problem, or even if they don't have a problem. You know, it's expensive, you know, to have a family and to help give them everything you can. And the thing that I love today is that you can go into a store and see a young person bagging groceries, you know, and they're so proud of what they do. And this is their job. And they have this opportunity. They feel good about themselves. I mean, it's got to be really, every one of us should feel proud of who we are.
Well, and I think we should pay attention to the businesses in our communities who have that philosophy, who do provide employment opportunities for everybody, for all of us. Because at the end of the day, that's really one taxpayer helping another. Mm-hmm. For us to support people to be fully involved in their society, to have the supports they need within the community so that they don't need a lot of assistance and they are able to attain optimal independence. It's really critical. I mean, it's good for the person, it's good for the family, but it's good for us as a community. And we deprived ourselves of these relationships and knowing what people really could do. People with intellectual and developmental disability have better track records, they have better attendance, they tend to stay at their jobs longer. And I always remember what my nephew Jagger, who volunteers at the ARC, and he helps out in the mailroom, and he goes through, he knows everybody, he's a social butterfly. But he said, you know, I always tell my friends at school, don't make fun or be afraid of somebody who's different from you. Because inside, our feelings are all the same, and you never know. Someone might not look like you, they might not be exactly like you, but one day they might end up being your best friend.
Oh, I love that. That's wonderful. You know, you seem very passionate about this, about your place in the community today and what you're doing. Let's back up a little bit and see how you got there. Let's talk about you have a master's of public administration from the University of New Haven. Why did you decide to choose public service as your focus?
Well, it's interesting. I was in publishing for 30 years.
Yes.
And I always joke that I became a writer when I was 7 years old and wrote my first poem, and I became an editor when I turned 8, reread it and threw it out. But all I really ever wanted to be was a journalist. And I was in publishing for 30 years. I did every job that I had ever wanted to do in journalism, from writing a story, from reporting a story, from helping design newspapers, to laying out newspapers, to editing the stories, and then I became a publisher. And by age 45, I was running a group of magazines for an international publisher, and I've never paid for a trip to Europe. And it was really an amazing life. I met a lot of interesting people. Muhammad Ali, I interviewed him for my high school newspaper when I was 17, and I asked him if he had advice for kids like me. And he said, tell them to go to college and get some knowledge, stay there till you're through. If they can make penicillin out of moldy bread, they can sure make something out of you. So I really had a lot of fun. But I'd kind of accomplished all my dreams by age, by my mid-40s. And when the ARC called me, I was a little taken aback because I said, I don't know anything about that. And they said, well, we need somebody who cares. I had been in spiritual publishing. We need somebody who knows how to run a business. And Tom Sullivan was my predecessor. He ran the ARC for many years, has a whole history of service in the field of disabilities. And so it was really a different concept for me to get my arms around, but I started to learn about the ARC. I checked out the website and started to read about the history of the ARC, and I thought, well, this is really something I could believe in.
Yeah.
And so I think my friends were concerned. And for years people were calling me saying, why don't you come back? I still go to the National Press Club and meet all my friends sometimes. But once I did it, it was a huge leap of faith in many ways, for not just me, but for the ARC. Because it was, and at that time, it was not really very common for somebody to make a for-profit, non-profit jump. And people kept saying, well, the ARC hired somebody who doesn't have a background in disabilities, and the board is saying, yes, but those are the skills we're going to need moving forward as budgets get tough. And so I had all of this experience in for-profit, and I'd been mentored and trained and coached, and I knew how to run multiple businesses simultaneously. But the question then is, what's the role of government socially? And what isn't the role of government socially? And how do government and business work together for optimal advantage? And people are really often, especially around election time, saying, why can't government run more like a business? And I thought that was a really fascinating question. So I spent a fair amount of time studying it and writing papers about it. And the fact is, government really has a different role than business. Sometimes it's regulatory, and a lot of times we think there's too much of that. But government steps in a lot of the times when really business can't. Things like mass transit, that might not be profitable if a business were to take that venture on. Things like utilities. Really, a lot of these organizations are quasi-governmental bodies because it requires infrastructure investment that a business really can't make in a community because it's not a business's role. Right. And so, really, you want to look at the optimal government-business partnership and things like the Mackinac Bridge Authority, which is connecting the northern and southern peninsulas of Michigan. That bridge, I believe, is still the biggest bridge in the world. And it was such a big project that even government was afraid to take it on. So the Mackinac Bridge Authority was established. Bonding started to, people were able to buy in to the project with bonds. People were able to take that risk. And so the Mackinac Bridge Authority raised the funds to build the biggest bridge in the world at that time. And it is still the primary economic driver for the state of Michigan.
That's amazing. I know Mackinac Island. I love Mackinac Island.
Couldn't get there without the bridge.
You couldn't get there without the bridges, right? Unless you fly or helicopter or use a boat or something like that.
Exactly. And so really even the ARC New London County is one of those partnerships. We can provide services for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families at about a third of the cost that the state can provide those services itself. But there is a caution that, because people say, well, why don't we just turn all of our nonprofits into for-profits? Well, the problem with that is that when money is tight, for example, during a recession or during a depression, business also is experiencing those constraints.
Absolutely.
And so that's when government kind of has to step in. That's when people need more supports. And really, in this past recession, the nonprofits here in southeastern Connecticut really took a hit. Our caseloads are way up. Our revenues are down by 20%. Wow. So if we didn't have that support for our safety net, this area would have been even worse off than it has been, which is really one of the 10 most economically depressed regions in the country.
Really?
And nonprofits, with the investment that government makes in its nonprofits when we do contract work at a much more favorable cost, we not only save the government money, but we are strong economic drivers in this community. For example, the ARC New London County buys about $120,000 worth of groceries at local grocery stores for our group homes. We buy $50,000 worth of fuel oil, about $100,000 worth of gasoline. TVCCA, through its fuel assistance program, buys about $220,000 worth of fuel oil in this region, keeping these local family-owned fuel oil companies going. So it's not just about helping people to help themselves. It's not just about giving people a hand up. But it's also about helping our local businesses. Really, a cut to nonprofits is a cut to local business.
That's an interesting way to look at it. I hadn't thought of it that way.
Nonprofits in southeastern Connecticut contribute $560 million in wages into the economy. That's your local grocery store. That's your local hardware store. It's your local restaurants. It's your beauty salons and barber shops. And the goods that we buy, just here in southeastern Connecticut, contributes to $1 billion of the local economic commerce in this region.
Wow. That's pretty darn amazing.
So we're not just helping people train for jobs. We're not just helping people get out of, say, a domestic violence situation, as, say, Safe Futures would do.
Right.
Not just providing dental and health care like Child and Family or UCFS would do, but we're also a very significant economic presence in this area.
You definitely are. And I think in the second half, what we're going to do is we're going to clarify the picture of how you would help a person with their training, a job, a home, and all of that.
Exactly.
You know, I'm trying to get this business and government, you know, which is like oil and water, and how can they work together efficiently? Now you're on some councils and involved with, you know, some of the national and state organizations. What is it that you do when you're involved in those conferences and councils?
What I'm involved with my work with, say, the ARC of the United States and the National Conference of Execs of the ARC, we're looking at what families need, what works, what's most efficient. No sense in delivering services that people don't want or that aren't really helping to an end result for outcomes-based results. And so we're looking at what ARCs in the United States are doing innovatively. How are agencies, for example, reinventing themselves? Which ARCs are providing residential supports that might be cutting edge, innovative? And then we sit down, we have forums, we have trainings around that. Employment services, it's the same thing. So we would do that on a state and national level, and we meet as the Connecticut Conference of Execs of the ARC. We meet every month, talk about who's doing what, bring in speakers, a lot of motivational talks as well, but problem solving, how to run organizations more efficiently. And then in terms of statewide with, say, the Southeastern Connecticut Council of Governments Health and Human Services Council, or the Governor's Cabinet for Nonprofit Health and Human Services, we are looking at how everybody can work together for optimal efficiency. And so, for example, we have 30 vans that aren't being used from 5 p.m. to midnight because they're parked on our lot, because we have every single van and every single staff member is 100% engaged from 7 in the morning until 5. And sometimes even on weekends. But what can we do if this area, for example, has a transportation problem? And people can't get from here to there, particularly from the hours of 5 to midnight, can our vans be put into use? So that's one of the things we're talking about at CCOG Health and Human Services. And then in terms of the Governor's Cabinet, what is it that health and human service providers most need in the state to allow us to, say, for example, keep our buildings up so that the cost in the long term isn't higher than it is now? So, you know, what are the needs of health and human service providers? And then when you talk about the government-business partnership, we contract with the state. And because we are allowed to run under a for-profit independent parameter, we can do those services a lot less than, say, the state with all the layers of government might be able to do it for itself. And we kind of streamline the process. For example, government is set up to serve everybody exactly the same.
Right.
And business is a little more specialized. And so we are kind of the Rosetta Stone, so to speak, between government's ability to do it all exactly the same all the time and getting to people who really need specialization in their services and responses.
How do you find the people that need your help?
Well, that's a really good example of partnership, because people will call the state of Connecticut, Department of Developmental Disabilities, and they will say, for example, I'm a parent, I have a child, and a really common scenario these days. I am a professional in the community. My parent just died. I have a brother with IDD. He's barely been out of the house. He's lived with my parents for 20 years. And now mom and dad have passed on. What do I do?
Okay.
So then sometimes people will call, say, a local social service agency in Groton or Stonington or Norwich. Those organizations will refer them. Or they'll call the Department of DDS saying, I have a relative with IDD, I don't know what to do. then those people will be referred to us. So we'll go in, we'll say, well, tell us about, your situation. What is it that you need? And then we'll help get people back on track. And you would be surprised. I mean, we have people, doctors, lawyers, who really don't know where to turn. Professional people who know how to navigate society and say, if I'm a doctor and I have this problem, imagine the kinds of situations that are out there where people really need support with and don't actually know where to turn. So you can always call the Arc-New-London County. You can actually call almost any social service agency. If it's not what we do, we'll hook you up, and we may make 3 calls, we may make 5 calls, but we'll do what we can to hook you up with the service. I had somebody in Hartford call me who had a family crisis in Tennessee, and I called the executive director of the ARC of Tennessee, who contacted Protection and Advocacy in Tennessee, hooked the family in Hartford up with the right people in Tennessee, and got help for a parent who was in a bad situation in Tennessee.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So that's your nonprofit service at work.
It is. I do want to get to these 2 signs that we've got in front of us, because after the break we're going to switch them out to 2 other signs that will go along with what we're going to be talking about. So the one that's in front of you is talking about your mission and your vision.
Yes.
And every business is told, okay, you got to write a mission, you got to write a vision, so you can explain it to people. So tell us what that says.
Well, for the last year, the Arc-New-London County's been exploring its mission and vision. I talked about talking to some of the original founding families, and so after 63 years of being in business, the question becomes, well, are we doing what we set out to do? Are we doing it optimally? And so we had a year of discernment. We went and sat down with the families who founded the ARC, asked them what their goals were, and then we asked every employee at the ARC to write on a piece of paper why they come to work every day. And then we sat down with the people we serve in the families and the Department of Developmental Disabilities and said, what are the needs in the community? What do you need from us? And out of that came a refreshed, it's really not new, but it's a refreshed mission and vision rooted very squarely in 2015 and the next 5 years in terms of service to this community. And basically our mission, to partner with people living with intellectual and developmental disability for equal participation and inclusion in the communities of southeastern Connecticut. Now, I want to be sure that every single person, including me, who walks in the door at the Arc-New-London County understands what that means. So we boiled it down to just one sentence: in partnership for full equality. And we really understand that. And a whole list of goals along the mission and the vision then kind of sprang forth from that. I'll read you a couple of them. For example, civil rights. We partner with people living with disability to promote their voice and champion their perspective. We facilitate in the community the development of natural relationships as opposed to these institutions that we were talking about. So that people have a connection with their communities. Innovation. We continuously break new ground in providing a menu of service options and improve how we operate our organization to bring meaningful change for the future. Family. We encourage and facilitate family education and engagement as fundamental to helping people living with disability achieve positive outcomes. Leadership. We model choice in everything we do. So I don't hire employees. The employees hire one another. We can't empower anybody if the people working at the ARC don't understand empowerment and if our employees aren't fully empowered themselves. And so when we talk later about the services, we're going to have a really fun story about how the people we serve and the employees came together for one of our best service platforms that we've launched just in the last couple of months. And then, finally, we will change our community by modeling and raising awareness of our mission. And, our values are person-centered. We have to act with the utmost integrity. We believe in stewardship. And so all of these things really drive us every day. I don't think anybody comes to work at the Arc-New-London County with any doubt about what the goal is for that day.
Wow, what a great atmosphere to work in.
It's very energizing, I have to tell you.
It is. It would have to be. I mean, we could all learn from that. And then we have another sign here, which is about an event that's coming up. Let's talk about that a little bit.
This is exciting, Marilyn. Thank you for asking me about this, because the Arc New London County every year, first week in October, hosts the Strides Road Race. And this is a fun run, walk and roll, a 5K, a 10K. Everybody's welcome. It's a great family event. The Jack O'Keefe Memorial Strides Road Race. This year it's October 4th, but it's always the first Sunday in October. It starts at 9:30 a.m. It's over at Camp Harkness. We've been running this for decades now. It started out with the Department of Developmental Disabilities, and my predecessor, Tom Sullivan, who lobbied for me to take the job at the Arc New London County, as well as Jack O'Keefe and George Daly, two fellows who were really involved in helping people with intellectual disability get recreation opportunities in the community, which at one point people were not even really open to thinking that sports were something that people with IDD should be able to participate in. So these guys were really instrumental in changing the perspective. So now, in honor of that, first week Sunday in October, it's a very affordable event for families, and these are our sponsors. Outback provides all the food. MJ Sullivan, the Tallinn Fund, TriPoint, Matter Construction. I bought my car at MJ Sullivan. Great people. And we just have so many community sponsors, and I really would encourage families to come out, bring your kids. It's really fun because we have face painting, we have popcorn, we have free lunch, and families run together. Families can walk together, and it's a fun run, walk, and roll. So whatever you're doing, if you're moving, you're welcome. We have wheelchairs, and this year we have a really exciting new special guest, Amby Burfoot, the Boston Marathon champion and editor at Runner's World magazine. He's a local Mystic native. And Amby Burfoot, a famous world-class runner, will be there greeting families. He will be running in the race, and we are very honored to have him and very grateful. And Amby is very interested in running for families, running for kids, and the good things that can come out of that. And we have, even within the ARC, a couple of our employees who run in this race and have taken up running in the last couple of years. And now some of the people we serve have decided that they might want to become runners too. And so we do Special Olympics, but this is a race where we have a runners club at the ARC. And Laura runs because she has narcolepsy, and she feels that running is a real therapy for her, helps her maintain her well-being as a runner. We have somebody else who has a thyroid condition. April wants to lose weight. And we have another fellow who wants to stay in shape for Special Olympics, and another guy who wants to make friends. And so we've got all these people who've taken it upon themselves. They're training for the race. We'd love to see people there to join us, join the Arc New London County in that race. Just not for community wellness, for community fun, but also for a great family event.
I think it sounds great. And what I want you to do is I want you to write it down. I want you to write down the date, which is the first Sunday in October, and go to the website, thearcnlc.org, and there's more information there.
Yeah, you can sign up, you can pay online and everything.
That's great. That's wonderful. What we're going to do right now is we're going to take a little break, and then we'll be back and we'll talk more about the actual services and how people are helped with the organization. So hang in there and come back. We'll be right back.
Can you help me with this? My new dad teaches me all kinds of stuff.
Sure.
He helps me with homework.
That would be 3.6795.
Thanks.
Yep.
He helps me with my decision making.
I wouldn't use this one. Ever.
And he's even teaching me how to drive.
And that's why cars have bumpers.
I'm learning so much.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of kids in foster care will take you just as you are. When some people struggle with their mortgage payments, they become frozen, petrified. Not knowing what to do, they do nothing. But the people who take action are far more likely to get the most positive outcome. Making home affordable is a free government program. Call now to talk one-on-one with a housing expert about the options that are right for you. Real help, real answers, right now.
There's a shelter pet who wants to meet you. Meet one today. Visit theshelterpetproject.org. Adopt.
Up, college is hard. Down, those books are heavy.
My sport is football, but my passion is education.
Right up here.
So every year I take promising high schoolers on a college tour
Lights there, darts there.
to show them that higher education means a brighter future. My name is Nnamdi Asamoah. I don't just wear the shirt, I live it.
You can be a reader, tutor, or mentor too. Take the pledge at liveunited.org/volunteer.
Do you wear this?
And welcome back to From This Corner TV. We're here today with Kathleen Stauffer, who's the CEO of the ARC New London County. And there's an awful lot of information that we've been sharing with you. We've been actually talking pretty fast because there is so much to put in. Everything from the background of the organization, her involvement, the upcoming event, and what I wanted to do was I wanted us to have us now focus on how you do help someone, because it's kind of hard to picture exactly how you help someone. We've got some more signs up in front of us that help show that. So
Exactly. Well, we help people in every aspect of their life. In whatever respect you might be looking for, say, a house or a job or help in your home, that's what we would provide. And so the ARC New London County operates 14 houses, community living homes throughout New London County, which house anywhere from 3 to 5 people who may go to jobs, they might have medical supports that they need. We're licensed by the state to do it. We're regulated by the state to make sure that these are safe, happy homes that people feel really are theirs. Mm-hmm. So I would not, for example, take a tour through a house like that. That house belongs to the people who live there.
Yeah.
And so that's just the residential piece is one thing that we do. More and more, rather than having a group home there, though, where we would own the home, what we would do is help people rent an apartment. We would make sure that that apartment is on a bus line or on a transportation service of some sort so that the person can get to work, can get to social activities, can go visit their family. Technology is really leveling the field for people with intellectual disability. For example, and a lot of the times it's not really all that expensive, there are stoves that will remind you to turn them off. So somebody who otherwise might not be, well, actually, a lot of the supports that are being used for people who, we have an aging population, as we all know, the boomer population, a lot of these things, and it's really kind of sad because these services were not created for people with intellectual disability. They were created for an aging population because a market opportunity was seen. But of course, we're using those as quickly as we can for people with intellectual disability, because it allows a person who maybe has a short-term memory issue, who wouldn't remember to turn off the stove, to just have a reminder, and they can cook and they can live by themselves, and they might not be able to. Pictures, for example. And when we talk about some of the retail and job training things that we're doing, for example, we have a culinary program. We've talked a lot about jobs and employment and things like that. People may live in an ARC home and be able to opt in for employment supports from the ARC, or they may use a different provider. You have choice, and as the families and the people involved are looking for the provider who can provide them with the best choices and the best opportunities. So in our vocational program, for example, people will come in, they'll have an assessment just like you would do if we went to a job corps or a job bank, find out what that person's skills are, find out what the person likes to do, what their talents are, and For example, we have a cookie factory in Groton, and the ARCs of New London County stands apart from, I believe, most other agencies in this state, in that people with IDD are the only population that can be paid sub-minimum wage. And for us, this is a very serious dignity issue. Our board of directors made a decision that every person who works with the ARC of New London County will be paid minimum wage or higher.
Oh, good,
that puts
good.
a different kind of responsibility on us.
It does.
So we are creating platforms where we will work toward modest profitability in all of our enterprises, and then place people into the community in real jobs. And so, for example, in our cookie factory, Chef Tom will teach people how to make the cookies, teach people how to do food prep, all the different line operations. We also do catering and make other baked goods. And then when Chef Tom feels that a vocational student is at the place that he or she needs to be, Chef Tom will connect with a chef at Mohegan Sun who has an opening, and Chef Tom and that chef will talk together, and then a person will be trained specifically to do food service and to obtain a food service job at minimum wage or higher at Mohegan Sun.
Wow.
And there are examples of this all throughout the community. Raymore and Flanagan, SureBright Cleaning, Ace Hardware in Norwich, McDonald's, really all through the community, really great employers, community people who believe in a fair shot for everybody. And recently when I said that we were going to talk about something exciting, we feel that if people are trained in cutting edge technologies, that will give somebody an advantage. Imagine, for example, and the Community Foundation was really excited about this, Chelsea Groton Bank, People's Bank, we have to import 80% of our produce in Connecticut in the wintertime. And so we decided that if people could understand green technologies, there may be a time when really a lot of us have a little aquaponics set up in our house where we're hydroponically or aquaponically growing our own produce. So we thought if we train people with IDD in these cutting edge technologies, they would have an advantage in the workplace over other people. And wouldn't it be fun if people with IDD could teach other people how to do cutting edge green technologies? And so we built an aquaponics grow room in a garage with grants. All of it was built with grants and our community partners. And once those aquaponic crops were harvested, people decided, the people we serve and the staff decided they wanted to do more of it. So they came to me and said, well, we want to do much more than one. We want a farm stand. We want a big garden. So, can we do it? And so we started writing grants, and fortunately we did have space on one of our group home lots, and we asked the people who live there, do you mind if we do this? They're saying, well, we might want a part-time job working at the farm stand if we want to earn extra money, so go ahead. And by the way, we should have free vegetables if you're going to be on our property.
Of course.
Which struck me as fair. And so we now have, off of Route 117, a farm stand. It's operating from 7:30 to 2, Monday through Friday. This came out of this empowerment philosophy, our new strategic plan. I just bought some spaghetti squash up there this week. It's great. And we're selling out. We can't keep the zucchini bread in stock. And now next year they want to have an even bigger garden. And but getting back to some of the things that technology can do, not just with aquaponics, but the retail technology, the Chamber of Commerce gave us a grant for iPads, so people just push the picture. They can ring people up. We can have people can pay in whatever form. We can take cash. We can take credit cards. But we're training people in these retail technologies so people can go out into the workplace and really work at optimal levels.
That's amazing. And I did see, you're talking about the Farm and Ledger that was in the paper a few days ago, and showed a couple of the guys sitting there and taking care of this, and there they are.
Right here.
How great. I saw this and I thought, how great is that, okay? And aquaponics, I'm reading this and I'm going, I have no idea what they're talking about, but all I know is I like those kinds of vegetables, and I like garlic, I like arugula, and I like basil, and all that, those kinds of things. I think that's wonderful.
It's terrific, and it's really energizing people, and getting people excited about really having self-determination, because this came out of the dreams of the people we serve. It wasn't something that was handed to people. So we provide those employment supports in a whole wide variety of arenas. We also do in-home supports. You know, a family might not need a group home. A person might not want to live in a group home. A person might want to live in their apartment, but they might need, say, a couple of hours a week paying bills. They might need somebody to check in, and there again with technology can dispense medications really effectively in ways that maybe it couldn't do 5 years ago. So somebody who maybe couldn't live alone before, with the right medicated supports and the reminders to take the medication, might be able to do that. And so we pretty much provide as much or as little as somebody needs. And we have, in our employment center, we're serving 88 people. In our community program, community integration, which is a day program where a parent might want to go to work and the person, their child, maybe needs a little more support than say, and maybe isn't able to work. Community integration, 45 people. In-home supports, 76 people, 63 people living in our homes, 300 people supported at camp, out at Camp Harkness, where we were talking about our fundraiser. And that fundraiser raises money for our community life and advocacy program, which over the years has really evolved with the ARC from a recreation and Special Olympics program, which we still do. And those things are really important. But you know, the numbers of employment for people with IDD have not changed in 20 years. And another unfortunate reality is that if you ask a person with intellectual and developmental disabilities what their biggest problem is, they will say loneliness. Oh. And so we started community life and advocacy as a social program for people with IDD. And that has grown into a very much different program as needs have emerged. We still do those social integrations, but 80% of women with intellectual and developmental disabilities have been sexually abused. Oh. So if we're going to talk about inclusion, we'd better give people the tools they need to be safely integrated in their environments. And sometimes the problems are not external, sometimes those problems are internal. And so we have support groups for survivors of sex abuse, survivors of domestic violence. We have a really great program called Elements of Ellen, where a family came to us and said, our cousin Ellen has died. She had Down syndrome. Ellen Lasanda in Norwich. And we said, well, tell us a little bit about Ellen. And they said, well, Ellen loved to dress up. You know, she really loved clothes. She was a fashion plate. Now, you know, the marginalization that people with IDD face, largely because of that label, the R word, yes, which we ask people not to use. A lot of times, because of that segregation, people aren't socialized like you or I are. They don't go to buy clothes with their friends. Right. They are not in a classroom with other kids their own age all too often. And so we created a program called Elements of Ellen, which is about self-presentation skills. And people with IDD can go to local stores. It's a program for men and women, learn hair care, skin care, nail care. How do I want to present in a job? What might I talk about with my friends that I really should not be talking about at work? We have a guy who wore shorts and a t-shirt to church for 20 years. And one of the people who lived in the home with him was always trying to get him to dress up. And one day he came downstairs. He was on his way to church. He has a nice pressed shirt and khaki pants, and they said, you look terrific. You dressed up for church. He said, well, my peer group and I discussed this, and we don't think that shorts and a t-shirt are appropriate for church.
All right.
Another person who comes to our programs arrived, and somebody said, oh, is that a new shirt? It's beautiful. She said, well, my peer group discussed that I had some shirts that had little tears and stains, and my peer group doesn't think, people don't wear clothing like that. So I got rid of all the clothing that was stained and had tears in it, and I bought a couple of new shirts. So this is a way for people to really, really, in positive and constructive ways, look at their impact in the community, look at how the way we present affects our career choices, our career prospects. And we recently had a young man who was asked to the prom, and he didn't have money for a suit for the prom. So we put him through Elements of Ellen. He was able to go out, get measured for a suit. He was crowned king of the prom.
Did I see that in the paper?
It's in our next newsletter.
Oh,
so there
okay.
you might have.
I saw something very similar to that. I don't know if it was here or somewhere else, but I remember specifically seeing that there was a young man who went to the prom, and he had help with, dressing properly, and he had a date, and I thought, isn't that wonderful? And he's got to feel so good about himself.
Yeah, well, and he can use that suit for job interviews.
Exactly.
The way that we, the things that we take for granted in life, people with IDD and their families cannot take for granted. And I really hope people remember that when they're talking about, oh, well, everybody has to be politically correct. We're talking about people. We're talking about feelings that are no different than yours or mine. And we're talking about people who can give back. The thing that I'm proudest of about community life and advocacy is, again, in turning this idea upside down that people with disabilities are not able to be full participating members of their society. We have a volunteer corps out of community life and advocacy. People have contributed $5,000 worth of volunteer time to the community. People participate in fundraisers. People have been helping with the Hartford Marathon. We have a guy named Aaron who cheered people on. He had over 200 shares on Facebook. People said, who was that guy at the finish line? I almost didn't finish, but he helped me to cross the line. We have people cleaning up public library properties. We have people doing community gardening. And we are showing the ability. And that's really, if you want to get to the heart of what the ARC is about, it's see the person, see the ability. Civil rights equals choice. And so we are showing the community that people with intellectual disability are active, contributing members of our community, and that really changes minds and really changes stereotypes.
It certainly does. And I hope as you've been watching this show, you're realizing the changes that have been taking place in our society and our mindset with people who do have, you call it IDD?
Intellectual and developmental disability, and yes, it's IDD. And the other thing we would say is we talk about people first language. So instead of saying, I'm an asthmatic person, I'm a person with asthma. So a person with intellectual and developmental disabilities, a person with autism.
Exactly.
Put the person first.
Okay.
So that everybody, people say to me, well, what do you call the people you serve? I said we call them people. Thank you, Marilyn. Yeah,
Yes.
That's exactly it. We call people.
That's good. Exactly. And we all have something, right?
Absolutely. Well,
we all have something that, nobody is perfect, okay? I forget things every once in a while. Who doesn't?
Well, and some people, our governor has mentioned at times that he had a learning disability growing up. I really struggled with math, and I tested at levels that got me some labels, and I never would have thought that I would pass graduate level statistics, but I'll tell you, there was a reason that I didn't go to grad school until later in life, because those labels really have an effect on how we see ourselves and our abilities. And I think if we want to talk about how we as a region can recover, how we as a nation can recover, how we can be as strong as we can be, we need everybody's talents. We need everybody to be able to step up and contribute.
We do. And as you're talking, I'm thinking of all the different stories that celebrities, famous people, Tom Cruise, he had a learning disability, and he had labels. We're all people first and foremost.
We're all people. We're all members of a community. And quite frankly, when every one of us participates optimally in our community, the community wins, the person wins, and the taxpayers win.
Exactly. Because you had mentioned, and we've got just another minute or two, you had mentioned how when you're helping someone, it actually costs the government less.
Absolutely.
You'd mentioned that.
Well, and for example, we have people who are requiring, say, $250,000 worth of supports. They're a danger to themselves, they're a danger to others, they don't have a job. The people need really extreme behavioral intervention. And there are ways to help a person walk from here to there with very specific interventions that are constructive and positive. And we have people who have gone from $250,000 worth of support for the rest of their lives to not needing any supports at all and saying, I don't feel I have IDD anymore, I don't want any support. And I can tell you the difference that people who have jobs, people who because they don't want the label, say I'm going to decline services, and they will get along just fine the way that you and I do with their job. There are people who maybe need large amounts of supports and then need only a fraction of that. We see that this happens every day. I mean, we're talking about over the course of a year, we can save millions of dollars.
Wow.
With just a handful, sometimes 2 or 3 people, by helping people alter their behaviors, helping people understand what they need to do, and moving people to more positive places in their lives. People's lives can be changed, and the reliance on government is much less, and those people who would be institutionalized, the cost is 3 times as much.
Well, I think that's a great note to end this show on. A lot of things to think about, okay? I always like to finish with a quote, and so I looked and looked, and I found this one from Winston Churchill. He said, "We make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give." And I thought that was pretty darn interesting. I like what he said. And I really thank you for joining us today, and thank you for being with us and telling us all this. We covered a lot of ground in this time period that we had. Thank you for joining us, and join us again next time on From This Corner TV.